that step. Okay, guys, welcome to the workshop. So in this process, if you got questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. The trick with raising the hand is I can't see the entire group all the time. And we've got right now 12 active participants. It's likely that we're going to go up to 15. So I would recommend putting it in the chat. And then I will know that because it's right in front of my face. I expect this to take about an hour and a half. So I'll try to keep it entertaining. If you fall asleep, that's okay. I can understand. But we'll try to keep this fun and exciting as much as it can be. Be willing to take notes. At the end of this, you'll receive an email later tonight, tomorrow morning, with the slides. So if you miss something, don't worry about it. And there will also be a replay where you can go, you can go through this again and take more notes. Okay, so I encourage you to actively participate through the chat. That helps make this a little more personal and a little less more like a corporate meeting. So let's get started. So we're going to talk tonight about toxic people. Now, if you've got questions after this class, or you have something you want to specifically address, maybe have my assistance or have something with that that I could have input in, you can text me at 208-918-0907 or email me at experts@freetheself.com and I will get back to you. Okay? Okay, so what to expect in this workshop, combating toxic people. One, there's not a sales pitch to anything. Yes, I do this professionally. Yes, I run a company doing this. I've done this for 10.5 years, but I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to educate you, give you insight into what's going on, add to your life so you know what to do, you know what you're dealing with. Okay? We're going to learn how to identify toxic behaviors using the 6 qualities I use to help identify these things in people around me. And even if I'm being toxic, because it's completely possible that I'm toxic, so I'm going to be open to that one too. And now it's going to go down. Understanding possible reasons for why they do what they do. Toxic behaviors come from a place, and they can come from many different things. Understanding what that is can help our brain make more sense of it, but it is not used. I don't intend to educate you on how to fix, repair, or rescue somebody, because that's not what this is for. We're here to understand, but not to rescue, fix, or change somebody, okay? Or caretake them. All right, and then we're going to talk about how we combat these kinds of behaviors. And then we're going to discuss something that's really, really important here with love addiction and extracting yourself from this. Love addiction is prominent in the work that I do, and it is one of the big hooks that keep us going back to the toxic person, especially if we're dealing with narcissistic relationships or where we've been emotionally abused and our brain has literally confused the abuse with love. All right, so this workshop is for anybody who identifies with people-pleasing or codependency, anybody who is a victim of narcissistic abuse or neglect. I am going everywhere on this. Anybody who struggles with standing up for themselves, saying no, asking for what they want, and they also fear love. If we fear love, we've definitely been abused. That is one of the massive red flags to this. Is that love is scary. Something has harmed us in the past. And then anybody who craves freedom from themselves and to live their lives in peace, because the criteria we get in this workshop helps us start choosing healthy people. So we know what an unhealthy person is. We know what to say no to. And then in a future workshop, we're going to talk about how to identify healthy people so we can say yes to them too. So a bit about me. I'm going to put this in here because I need to qualify myself. You need to know that I'm coming from a qualified place, that I'm not some just dude on the internet that's like, oh, I know how to do this. Come join my workshop. I have experience. I have training in this. I've been doing this for a long time. And so transparency, you know where I'm coming from. So who am I? I see myself as a computer nerd. I worked in computers professionally for over 20 years, ran a computer business, was a QA director, IT guy. A little tidbit about me, I find it's interesting for people to know. I don't like soup. It's not a meal. Soup is not a meal. I grew up in a narcissistic and codependent home. So I have very much a very deeply personal experience with toxic people. I was a toxic person at one point. In my former marriage, I was a very toxic individual at that point. I'm also a survivor of narcissistic abuse and chronic emotional, physical neglect. I grew up in a home that didn't hug, didn't touch. We didn't talk about the issues going on. There's a lot of things that went wrong in that family. This set me up to become a practitioner. When I started working out my own issues and started doing my own journey, I was healing, and then I was invited to become what at that time would be termed a healer. And I term myself now as a mentor. I've been practicing in this for over 10 and a half years. I've worked with over 400 people around the world in doing this. I have a strong success rate of 98% of people who do the work actually succeed. I'm a father of two. That's my daughter and my son. And like I mentioned, I am a mentor. Why do I mentor? It's because I went through this abuse. I survived and healed from it because my mother and my father were both narcissistic codependents. So when I talk about narcissism, we talk about toxic people, we talk about codependency, it's not an identity as much as it is a set of behaviors people use to control access to love. My mother died when I was a child from brain cancer, and then my stepmother was brought into the picture shortly thereafter, and she is a full-blown borderline or narcissist. So a lot of emotional violence came into my world, and that filled me with deep shame and deep hate for me, to the point where I attempted suicide 4 times in my life. I had a severe anxiety disorder that created, literally, in one day, it was April of 1998. I had 4 major panic attacks in less than 24 hours. I thought I was going to die of a heart attack at that point. That was my life for a very, very long time. And then I felt isolated. I felt controlled. I felt unwanted. But then after 20 years of looking, of reading books, of doing the self-helping, going to therapy, I found a way through it. So I've helped over 400 people heal and thrive. Here's a couple of the people I've worked with. We've worked with Leighton and Ginger and Amalia and some other individuals here. I post these here as an effort to show that I'm actually real. So some of you may have never worked with me, may not even know who I am. Here's evidence that what I teach works and is real, and I'm not just some fly-by-night guy on the internet, which there are a lot of those out there, especially in the life coaching industry. All right, so let's get started. So be sure to ask questions and participate in the chat, okay? So let me know where you're from in the chat. Let's make sure this thing actually works, and then as we do that, we'll see what starts popping up. If you don't know where the chat is, check if you're on the computer, it's the bottom of the screen. You'll have the chat put in the thing there. Connie, West Boise. If it's on the phone, I'm not sure where it's, let me look on the phone. Yeah, there's you'll see it says participants. You click on that, it'll open up a chat option. You click chats, and you're like, oh, neat. And I can put it in. Like I'll do it from the phone, my phone, boom, hi. So, okay, so here we go. So let's define toxic. This is where we've got to start off first. Toxic means poisonous, virulent, noxious, deadly, dangerous, harmful, injurious, pernicious. Okay, toxic doesn't mean ouch. Oh, I scraped my hand, or ooh, that didn't feel good. Toxic means it's deadly. It's gonna kill us. Oh, hi, Karina. Welcome. It's harmful. So when I use the word toxic, I mean it in its deliberate sense. And the reason I'm kind of really enforcing this is because a lot of times, especially from a codependent mindset, we have diluted this term of toxic or abuse to be like, well, they're just having a hard time. They just are trying the best they know how. We're not taking it literally, and we're not taking it seriously, and that can really harm the quality of our life. So we've got to be very active at being conscious about what we're really saying and what these things really, really mean, all right? So toxic means that it is poisonous, it's virulent, it's gonna harm us, okay? Toxic will harm us. Think of it like radiation Or like you bought this delicious piece of meat and you brought it home and you're looking at it and then it's like, wait a minute, something's wrong with this meat, right? It says growing something on it and it doesn't smell right and doesn't look right. Are you going to cook the meat and eat it? Are you going to cut out the bad parts and eat the rest of it? No, you're going to throw it away because it's harmful. It's going to hurt you if you ingest it. Well, people can be the same way. So we got to be conscious of that. This helps us get out of a mindset that says, hey, they just need a chance to heal. Reality, yeah, they need a chance to heal, but we're not that chance. They need to go do it with a professional, not through you. Okay. So let's talk about the types of toxic people that I tend to identify and work or help my clients identify and work around. One, we have the big one, the overt narcissist. This is a self-centered, grandiose sense of importance. They demand special treatment. They have a profound lack of empathy. One of my clients was talking to me about their former narcissist, and she's like, this guy would tell me, hey, I know that you don't like it. I know it hurts you when I don't call you. That's why I do it. That's a narcissist. That's a toxic person. That's harmful. Especially when they're self-aware of what they're doing and they do it anyway. You're moving into sociopathic territory there. Narcissists also have an elevated sense of entitlement. They're often very loud and very aggressive. This is the one that we all see a lot of in the world. When we start to look at and detect these kinds of persons, they're very prominent. They're actually pretty easy to detect when we get into an awareness of like something's off here. It's always about them. Man, when I confront them or I bring up a problem, they victimize themselves. I'm the victim. Why did you make me do that? That kind of thing. So narcissists can be actually pretty easy to detect. Then we have what's called the covert narcissist. This is the guy that, or the gal, they often comes across as highly wounded, but they're very passive aggressive. They're very hypersensitive to any kind of feedback. They often feel neglected and belittled in who they are. They have delusions of persecution and about being literally the worst. I mean, they still have a grandiose mental mindset, but it's not about being the best. It's about being the best of the worst. Like nobody's trauma is worse than mine, or nobody could fix me. Nothing could ever change for me. They get very much into this self-aggrandizement of their pain. And they're often shy. They're often passive aggressive. They give you backhanded compliments. Like, you would have looked better in that dress if you lost some weight. Things like that. They are going to leave you confused more and more and a little off center. Whereas the narcissist, the overt narcissist up here, he or she's going to leave you feeling crazy and gutted in a lot of ways. Whereas the covert narcissist tends to string you along, and it's hard to nail them down. It's like putting jello on a wall. All right. So the third type is called the waif. And this is a term I use a lot for individuals who come across as helpless or unable or unwilling to take responsibility for their life. They're the chronic victim in everything. They need you to save them, and they need to be rescued, and they need to be cared for. These people tend to be emotional vampires. They show up as needing your energy, and then when they get it, they're done. They do a discard in that aspect. This is the kind of person that probably live on your couch for a long time and eat all your food and never leave. Waifs love to do that because, again, they're helpless. They have this thing called internalized helplessness. They believe that they are genuinely helpless in that. Okay, so, and then the fifth type is what I call the user. They get what they want. They do not reciprocate. They typically go silent until they want something. Then they avoid connection and meaningful relating. The user and the narcissist have a lot in common that way. The user, though, generally has a sense of empathy. They just don't want to take responsibility. So these are the common types of toxic people I see a lot out there. And then we have the controller. And this the controller shows up on the codependent paradigm. This is where the controller wants to, obviously I want to control everything. They demand that you do it their way, or the highway. They give very little, and they are highly perfectionistic. These types of toxic people are the ones that are easiest for us to detect. They're the ones we're likely to encounter, and they are driven by different sets of motivators. So keep an eye out for these as you run around life, because you don't want to deal with them. You want to put them at arm's length at a maximum. At a minimum, you want to, or at a minimum, at a maximum, you don't want to deal with them at all. But if you have to work around them, like they're a coworker or they're your ex and you have to deal with them because you have kids, you want to keep them at a minimum, at a far distance, and not give them a whole lot of like emotional information. So obviously this does not comprise the entire list of toxic people. This list comes from my experience of what people dominantly encounter among my client set. So that's why I picked them out. Okay. So any thoughts, any questions there from anybody? Do any of these seem familiar? Any of your relationships? You can say yes in the chat or raise your hand. Either way. But yeah, there are options. Yeah, okay, cool. So toxic people. Toxic people aren't really toxic. The person isn't toxic so much as it is their behavior. See, toxic people are people who've been injured. They've been hurt in a way, and they allowed that hurt to become toxic behaviors. They didn't manage it. They did not control it. They put it onto you. There's a meme that runs around that says, hey, if you don't heal yourself, you'll bleed on someone else, that kind of thing. We don't want to do that. And people with toxic behaviors have they're just bleeding on everybody. Well, it's your fault I feel this way. Well, my reaction's your fault. If you just hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have reacted that way. It's like, well, why do I have to change it? I'm the one that got hurt, that kind of thing. They tend to punish us for other people's behaviors, what other people have done to them. So now the difference between a toxic and a healthy person is this, and it always breaks down to this: behaviors. That's it. It's not a character issue, although their toxic behavior violates their character, their integrity, and it tells us who they think they are. But we gauge people's healthiness or toxicity based on their behaviors, because that's the one thing we can actively gauge. It's the one thing we can be objective about, rather than, having some sort of other experience that isn't really tactile. We can point at behaviors. And this gives us a lot of advantages, because when we approach it from behaviors, we're able to articulate why we're not dealing with them. Like, for instance, I am no contact with my parents, and people, my siblings and other individuals have asked me, why don't you, interact with your parents? And I'm like, because of their behaviors. And I can articulate exactly what those behaviors are. I give them personal information, and I will get it back in a twisted form through one of my family members. If I tell them that I'm having a bad day, I will find out 2 months later that they're claiming I'm running around depressed and need to be hospitalized. When they've asked me how I felt, like there's one time my stepmother asked me how I felt, and I said, I really miss my mom. And she went and told my father I was trying to destroy their marriage. So, that kind of stuff. So their behaviors earn the outcome. And it's easier to just point at it and say, they treat me this way, I don't want it, I move on. So we focus on behaviors. The other reason we focus on behaviors is it keeps us sane, because we can gauge behaviors. We can observe them. Especially if we're dealing with narcissistic individuals, they're going to gaslight us to no end. Well, we can detect them quickly with their behaviors, okay? Especially patterns of behaviors. So what behaviors are toxic? What are toxic behaviors? Toxic behaviors are any behavior that attempts to diminish you as a human being, diminish your emotions, diminish your decisions, diminish your existence. They attack the value of who you are. They go after your character. They go after your nature. This shows up with verbal attacks, shaming of body, identity, preferences, name calling. They claim you're unworthy in any way. I mean, we see religious systems do that. We see a lot of things, a lot of people that say, like for instance, I have a friend who's struggling with a separation, and their parents are like, well, we'll support you if you do it our way, or if you come back to our religion, we'll support you. That's a toxic behavior, and that is a diminishment of that person, because they're controlling love and attempting to make them unworthy, or tell them they're unworthy because they're not cooperating in the way the other person expects. So they diminish you. Okay, so that's number one thing to be looking at. How are they treating you? How are they talking to you? Does that diminish you? Are they attempting to diminish your value? Okay, the second way that toxic behaviors show up is control. Controlling of your choices, your life, your money, your body, your identity without your consent. So this is major boundary violation. So they insert themselves into that. They get in there and they fight with that. They try to make us turn it over to them, convincing us that we're not capable of making the right decisions. We're stupid. I remember being told that a fair bit. You're too stupid to make the right decision in this area. No, I'm not. I can actually do this. So it's a way they use diminish to get control. So is any of this sounding familiar to you guys? Have you had experiences where you have felt diminished, where you have felt controlled by somebody else, where this has happened to you? I might just unmute everybody. I'm going to try that too. Oh, yeah. Now we're all unmuted. Let's try it that way. So is this something you guys have experienced before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and we're talking about, we're all on the same page here. All right, so the next one is, I'm gonna, all right, so we got background music going on here. All right, so the next one is violate or ignore your established boundaries, your personal space, after requests to stop. Toxic people do not respect your boundaries. So they're going to violate them. They're going to ignore them. They may even deny that they exist. This is your biggest red flag because it's the most obvious. And I say red flag, I mean it's done. It's over. Red flags are not like, well, maybe they'll change. That's a yellow flag. Red flag is, hey, man, if I put up a no and you keep coming at it, I'm done. I'm like, you obviously don't respect my boundary. You don't respect me. So what's the point? Why am I here? This isn't healthy for me. So I will enforce my boundary by leaving. Okay. So they violate or ignore your established boundaries, your personal space, your identity, that kind of thing, after requests to stop. The reason I put requests to stop in there is because sometimes we have boundaries and somebody stepped on the boundary and they didn't know. It's not like we walk around with a list of boundaries for people to read. It's more like, oh, yeah, could you not do that? And they're like, oh, okay, totally, I won't do that. They're empathic, they're warm, they're responsive to it. That's a signal of a healthy person. But an unhealthy person be like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so sensitive about that? Man, stop making me stop victimizing me. Grow up. I was told that quite a bit. So violation, watch out for that one. The next one is monopolizing. They monopolize your energy, your money, your attention, your time, your conversation, the resources. They're all monopolized onto them. So if it's always about them, the conversation always steers back to their problem or their drama or their need. You're in an unhealthy relationship, doesn't it? Yeah. It's and it is fairly common, true, and it seems all so familiar, right? Especially with narcissistic individuals. Always them, because they're the only person that exists in the universe. So They monopolize things. They will not, when you push against it, you say, hey, what about me? They're going to turn on you. They'll be like, why are you so sad? You know, what's going on with you? Why can't you give me any space? You know, I was like, but we just spent 2 hours discussing your issue, and I would like to discuss something that's relevant to me. And they're like, no, I don't have time for that. That kind of stuff is pretty prominent with this. So, all right, and then blame. And blame is common. I know it's common, but it is toxic because what it does is it avoids accountability. It avoids being able to receive feedback and process it appropriately so you can have a safe relationship. Blame undermines trust. It undermines integrity and intimacy. Safe, healthy relationships work very hard to preserve intimacy and vulnerability so that you can see each other honestly. Blame will begin to destroy that rapidly. Often, blame and avoiding accountability show up through very specific behaviors, and we'll be discussing these. Some of them are blame shifting, Darbo, pivoting, playing the victim, and gaslighting. And we're going to talk about what those look like more in a moment. So I often get the question, what makes people do the toxic things? Why do they do the things? Well, there's a lot of valid reasons, and this is what I want to clarify again, is that this is for your understanding. It is not to help you fix them. So if you come from a codependent background, this information is to help you make sense of their behavior, but not to rescue, not to fix, not to fix the relationship. Because toxic people are toxic for a reason. They're toxic because they have behaviors they will not change. It's as simple as that. So this is more for your awareness rather than trying to control or fix something, okay? So chronic unmet needs, lack of clean, nurturing, healthy love from trusted sources is one of the most prominent causes of toxic behaviors. Toxic behaviors could be looked at as a survival mechanism, like they're just trying to preserve their sense of love and identity and importance in the world. They're just doing it in a really terrible way that burns all the bridges, which validate their fear that they're not lovable and not worthy, not wanted. So that is one reason why that happens. Another massive motivator is shame. Shame drives a lot of toxic behavior. When we deal with codependency, that is the root of codependency on the emotional side of it. Shame about our feelings, our wants, our needs. In a narcissistic individual, they actually have an enormous amount of shame locked in with an enormous lack of self-awareness. So they feel really trapped there. Shame will drive toxic behaviors. My own experience as a toxic person, it drove a lot of rage and anger and a lot of avoidance. Other things that show up as toxic behaviors, trauma, PTSD, and complex PTSD, these do create toxic behaviors because we can become very aggressive. We can be very controlling because of it. And if we address the trauma, we address the complex PTSD or the PTSD, then we can work out the behavior too. So healing is really required to transform toxic behavior into healthy behavior. Poor emotional management skills. I mean, we come back to this first one, chronic unmet needs. You're going to have struggle managing your emotions. I grew up with a panic disorder, so I couldn't manage it. Emotion was intense. I grew up physically and emotionally neglected. I mean, I can remember 3 times I was hugged by my mother and twice by my father in 40 years. That lack of physical connection, comfort, kindness results in emotional management problems because we don't know how to regulate. We don't know how to self-soothe. We weren't taught how to do that. So it'll show up as toxic behaviors like controlling, blaming, yelling, even diminishing because they want to push away the shame. They want to push away that discomfort. Untreated or unmanaged mental illness. I put this in here because my stepmother and her unmanaged and untreated but fully diagnosed mental illness was the reason things were going on. If she had been able to grasp how to manage what she was dealing with, there wouldn't be much of a problem. Okay, but she didn't manage to make that happen. But this, and my father's a paranoid schizophrenic. So you want to talk about interesting experiences with unmanaged or untreated mental illness, you would have that there. This doesn't mean that people with mental illnesses are toxic. It does mean that we got to find out how they manage that struggle so we can tell how they fit our world. Because sometimes they're that toxic that we can't have them in our worlds. But a lot of times, most of us with this work really hard at it, and we're able to have functional relationships. So not everybody falls into that category, but it's all about untreated or unmanaged at that point. Unregulated nervous system, this is where anxiety, panic, withdrawal, running away, those kind of things show up. And those are toxic things. Like I used to have a habit of getting into or pulling really close to people emotionally and then just yanking away from them because I had an avoidant attachment disorder. That's because I couldn't regulate the anxiety that came up with what's called proximity. So I was yinging and yanging, yo-yoing people, and that's really hard on them. It hurts. And then they get really confused. That would be legitimate toxic behavior. Physical, sexual, emotional abuse will lead to that in different ways. Children who are sexually abused and don't actually have therapy will actually mimic the abuse on other people. I was highly sexually abused, and I actually didn't have access to sex for a long time because of it. It was, and I mean access as in being able to have safe sex in my mind, like, oh, this is a safe person, I'll be okay. So I gave a lot of confusing signals. Yeah, I undermined intimacy and vulnerability. Severe abandonment. This right here causes majority of our pain. The fear of being abandoned, of isolated, being discarded, not wanted. This is going to drive people to go into ultra secure or ultra survival mode. That's where those toxic behaviors can show up. And really, it makes sense, but it doesn't justify the behavior. That's kind of the trick here. And the last thing, your personality disorders such as narcissistic personality, borderline, cluster B stuff, if you're looking at the DSM, that's what drives those kinds of toxic behaviors. So they can come from a lot of different places. My personal opinion is most of people's toxic behaviors are a cry for love, but we're not the ones that can give them that. They need it in a therapeutic controlled environment where they have made the decision to face the toxic behavior and learn how to receive love cleanly. So we can't do that as individuals in a relationship with someone. They need to be able to go out and do it themselves. And people who voluntarily take action to heal are the ones that heal, the ones who feel compelled to because their spouse wants them to, or because the state mandates them to, aren't gonna do it. They've got to have their own buy-in because they've got to be the ones willing to take ownership of those kinds of behaviors and the cost that comes with them. So, all right. So a big pro tip, we got Ripley here. And you can't, and she says, you can't help them. They're being cocooned just like the others. This is from a movie called Aliens. It's one of my favorites. Ripley's a really good avatar for this because she's like, I know what these things are. I know what it looks like. You can't win. This is me telling you the same thing. You cannot save, fix, or rescue toxic people. They are the ones that have to rescue themselves by taking proactive action to do the things that matter for them. Okay? So as she says, you can't help them. You got to let them go. And so the reason you can't save, fix, or rescue toxic people is because it's a lot like you are at an aquarium. You see these fish in the picture here? Fish, can you affect those fish? Can you do anything with those fish? No. You get to watch them. The toxic person is the fish. You get to see the fish do the fishy thing, but you can't really affect the fish. Not without putting the fish or you in harm's way. So healing is done within. So if the fish wanted to heal itself, it would need to do its work because trauma, pain, it's all within. It's in the person. It's here and it's in the heart. It's in the body. And only they can work that through because they're ultimately the gatekeeper of all of it. Okay? So your love, your empathy cannot heal their pain. It cannot heal their wounds or their trauma. Only their love can. Only their empathy can. Because once they start letting love in for themselves, other love can contribute to that healing, but it cannot make that happen. Okay? Your job, when you deal with toxic people, you realize this as a toxic person. Your job, first of all, is to start living your life. Is start to make changes for you. And if you struggle with this, make sure, to join my upcoming workshops, because I'm going to have workshops on codependency, on handling neglect, dealing with narcissists, that kind of thing, so that you can become empowered that way. So, okay. So when we're dealing with people with toxic behaviors, there's certain kinds of results that show up for us. And the first and most obvious or immediate one is that we start to feel a little crazy. We feel ungrounded. We feel like we're in the fun house after dealing with them. That's a signal. Your body's going, something's up here. Something's going on. How many of you guys have experienced crazy making? That sense of like, I don't know what the hell just happened.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. That's your first signal you're dealing with someone who's toxic. It's kind of like the fever. You're starting to get a little sweaty. You're like, I've got something going on here. That's your first signal. It's one of the easiest signals to come out on that. Confusion and distrust in your own perception of what happened. This is an advanced form of being crazy making, especially if it's persistent. Yeah, it leaves absolutely an empty feeling, because you're like, what's happening? If you start to distrust your own perception of what happened, it's time to get out, because they're now affecting you in a very negative way. So, and then we've got, you start feeling manipulated, violated, and used. You may not even know why or how, but you feel it. It's a sense. You're like, something's off here. What's up? This doesn't sit right. Your gut's like, bing, bing, bing. This is a problem. You're being manipulated, and you may not even know it. There was one time last year I was at a concert, and these individuals came up to me that were acquaintances of mine, and the man walked up to me and he grabs me and he starts turning me around, looking at my clothes, inspecting me, and my body's like, I'm being violated. And so I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, it sounds like what I wear is really important to you. I hope you work out that disappointment. And walked away from him, because I knew what was going on. He had overtly tried to manipulate and control me in some way, to diminish me, because he was intimidated. And I know that for other reasons. But that's a perfect example of feeling manipulated. My body was like, we're getting inspected. We didn't consent to this. I didn't ask for this. This is a violation. We're going to stop this. So pay attention to your body. Your body is your ally. It is your friend. It is one of your best tools in detecting toxic people, because you're going to feel off. It's not going to make much sense. Okay. All right. Then you're going to be left with emptiness, frustration, and resentment as this persists. It's just going to get worse, because you're going to confront it, because you're going to approach it from a healthy place. Hey, this hurts. Please don't do this. And you're going to be like, okay, maybe I'll change. Okay, I'm sorry I did that. I won't do it again. Then they do it again 3 minutes later. You're like, but I just told you that. Or, it happens a day later. Like, why is this, happening? Yeah, the body will typically know before the mind. Yep, absolutely. And so this begins to wear us down if we persist in this interaction with toxic people. And that's where this emptiness, frustration, and resentment start to brew. This tells you the fever of this relationship is getting hotter. You need to pay attention. You need to wake up to it, because you're in a toxic place, okay? Chronic exposure will result in high anxiety. You're going to feel shaky and unsafe. Unsafe with you, unsafe with them, unsafe with the environment. Depending on what's going on, you may feel like you don't know what even is real. I personally have experienced that. That was my life from around the age of 13 till I was about 32. I really didn't understand what the hell was going on. I just was like, I don't know if that was real or not, because I'd been so deeply and terribly gaslit. There were times where I would sit and question whether or not the things ever happened. Yeah, I have journal entries describing them, and I have third-party validation that it occurred. I'm like, but was it real? Did that really happen? Yeah, chronic exposure is going to result in this kind of unsafety, this huge sense of anxiety. Your self-esteem is going to be hammered. Why? Because you can't control someone who's confident, but you can if they hate themselves, and they can drain you. Because the one thing toxic people need is supply. And that supply will come in a lot of different forms: sex, money, attention, your mere presence. Just the fact that he or she has a soft place to land and dump all their shit onto you so they don't have to deal with it. They need a low self-esteem target because they're not going to fight back. They want supply. Kind of like, think of it like this. You go to Walmart and you want to buy those tasty little chocolates for me, right? You don't want to be fighting for the chocolates with everybody else, right? You want the chocolates, you want to go check out, and then you want to bring them over to me so I can feed on them. That is what the toxic person wants. That's what the narcissist wants. That's what the abuser wants. And the only way they can get that hammered through is to destroy your sense of boundaries and value. So they go after your self-esteem. So if you're starting to feel like shit as a person, it's time to get out. Your self-confidence will be hammered into the ground. Insecurity about your wants, needs, feelings, and self. Those are like the big alarms. Things are exploding. It's time to get the hell out of here. But one other thing's going to happen here. If you persist in the relationship, you will develop codependent habits such as pleasing, fixing, controlling, enabling, caretaking, avoiding conflict, and perfectionism. Because that's how you're going to survive love neglect. And that's all codependency is. That's why I don't put it up here as like a toxic behavior in the aspect of codependency is toxic. Codependency is a survival mechanism for dealing with the lack of love. It's how we navigated that nightmare, that maze of crazy. Okay. So I give you this little roadmap here, and it's obviously not all-inclusive roadmap. But if you start calling the ball when you start to feel crazy and ungrounded in a relationship and get out of it, then you save yourself a lot of pain and a lot of nightmare. Because once you get to chronic exposure, you've got a lot of work to rebuild yourself. Toxic relationships are not worth your well-being. They're not worth your goodness. They're not worth who you are. Nobody is. They need to go work out their shit, and you need to go live your life, be happy, expand, and contribute in the joy and the brilliance that you are. Okay? Any thoughts, any questions on that before we get into quickly identifying these things? And if you're muted, you might be able to unmute yourself. Not sure. Or just ask it in the chat. Okay. So how do we quickly identify toxic behaviors in people? Pretty quickly. Am I being diminished by the way in any way by them? Are they diminishing me in any way? It's pretty easy to answer. Am I being controlled without my consent? Are my boundaries and no's being ignored or violated? Are they monopolizing my time, energy, resources, and attention? Am I being blamed for things they say, do, choose, or create? Let's see, I have experienced tons of chronic exposure and have found healing. Oh, thank you, Karina. Yeah, you've kicked ass. The last year, you have gone out there and kicked some real ass. You're badass. Hashtag. So, all right. So this is how you can quickly identify it. This is something that's easy to do because you can ask yourself these questions and it's a yes or no. It's like, well, yeah, I feel diminished by them. Toxic. No, they actually respect me and I feel respected and liked and loved by them. Oh, cool. Okay. So am I being controlled without my consent? No, not really. How do they respond to my boundaries? Oh, they like them. Oh, see? Easy way to qualify someone. Now, it is very reasonable to say that, yeah, they diminish me, but they don't try to control me. That doesn't invalidate the toxicity. They're still toxic. They're diminishing you. So it's not an all or nothing. It's like, where is the toxicity coming in, if there is any? And if there is toxicity, we move on. We'll talk about some strategies on how to deal with that. All right. So, and here we are, toxic tactics for that you need to know that come from these tactics are the ones that the abuser is going to use. The toxic person is going to use. The first one's called Darvo. A lot of people don't know Darvo, but Darvo's been around for a little while, and the source is linked at the bottom there, University of Oregon. It stands for Deny, Attack, and Reverse the Victim and Offender Order. So, no, I didn't do that to you. You did that to me, and I am tired of being a victim of your life. That's Darvo. How dare you accuse me of doing that? You are diminishing my life. You have harmed my life by claiming that. Darvo. And we saw some really good examples in public media this year on Darvo. Darvo is, it's a form of projection, exactly. And it's important to understand that they will deny, then they will attack, and then they will make you the offender and they the victim. That way, you get confused. And that is the behavior to watch out for. Because when you see it, you're like, oh, I'm done. Because you can't discuss anything with somebody that behaves that way. The game is over. It's just like, this conversation doesn't exist. It's over. You walk away. You escalate and fighting them, they win because they make you look crazy. Okay? Gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation that seeks to sow the seeds of doubt in a targeted individual or members of a targeted group, making them question their memory, their perception, and their sanity. How many of you guys have experienced this little wonder?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, both probably systemically and personally, depending on what backgrounds we come from, because there are religious systems that do this. The government can do this to us. The media, people do it all the time. So yeah, it's very important to be conscious of that. That's where we start to feel uneasy, crazy, unsure about what's going on. And if it persists, we're going to start feeling like we don't know what's real. Common expressions of gaslighting. I like putting this in here because we need some examples, right? Well, that's not what I meant. You're misunderstanding what I said. Well, I didn't do that. And if I did, you deserved it. And then I love this one. This one drives me batshit crazy sometimes. They redefine the words. So you use a particular word, and then they're like, well, that's not the definition I use. So now they're changing the goalposts. You don't even know what reality is anymore because they use a different word. My stepmother would redefine the word 3 or 4 times just so she couldn't get caught in a corner of accountability. I'm like, so yelling at me is bad. Yes, but when I do it, it's the right thing. Why is it that? It's just, so yeah. They redefine those words and we go crazy. So we want to keep an eye out on that. These are the most common ones out there on gaslighting. If you want to learn more, Google it. There's a lot of information out there on it. Definitely read 3 or 4 sources, get a real rounded view for it. But yeah, and I get this one from Wikipedia. But yeah, crazy making right there. Now we have this thing called blame shifting. It's when a person does something wrong and inappropriate and dumps the blame on somebody else. How many times have we gone through that one? We might actually do this too. I am guilty of blame shifting, especially I did that a lot in my childhood and and it's actually pretty human to do it, but it is a red flag because then you don't have any accountability. If you don't have accountability, you cannot have integrity. And if you can't have integrity, what do you not have? What do you end up with? Anybody know?
Distrust. Just absolute confusion.
Confusion.
Yeah, distrust as well.
Yeah, confusion and distrust. There's no way to build trust with that system. So yeah, we have to be very, very mindful of that. I hear you, Daniel. I was a I was a revolving door on a lot of these in my marriage because that's how I survived it. Or that's how I survived my childhood. My marriage was actually pretty benign. I was the nightmare in that experience. So, but yeah, blame shifting, you should put on everybody else. 3-year-olds are really good at that, you know. All right, so the 4 horsemen. I put this one in here because this is, for those of us in a relationship, these are the 4 signals we have to look out for big time, because they indicate the relationship is in a very severe state of decay and you're in trouble. So you got to get some help with that. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. I may qualify criticism because a lot of times people confuse it with complaint. We have a right to complain. And a complaint would come across like, I don't like it when you do this. Or, I'm frustrated that the dishes have been left undone again, Marshall, this week. That's a valid complaint. Criticism would be like, I'm so sick of you not doing the dishes. You're stupid. You don't pay attention. You tell me these things and I'm frickin' tired of it. And we're getting into an attack there because they call me stupid. That also moves into contempt because, like, I hate you is a contempt. It's a vitriol tonality with that. Defensiveness is like, stop doing it to me. I'm a victim. Like, well, why are you getting upset at me for the dishes? You could do the dishes too. And then stonewalling is like, I'm done with this. If you watch The Office, that would be Dwight's unshun moment. That would be stonewalling. But it's like, I'm not talking about it, period. Now, stonewalling is not going, hey, I need a moment. I've got to step back from this. This is a little too much for me right now. That's taking a break. But the person who takes a break is the one that's responsible for re-engaging it too. Stonewalling is like, this conversation is done and it's over. Okay, let's see. What kind of actions produce hurt that gets stored in long-term memory? It's not so much the action as how the person interprets the action, how it affects them emotionally. Because I have a history of physical abuse, and some of it I just that happened. Other times, ooh. So it's more how the person internalized and processed it. It may not be what you think, right? It's not what was said. Yeah. It's not always what, but it is often how. Tonality, aggressiveness, physical posture, volume can really cause a lot of pain. Yeah, and often, and you make a good point there, because if toxic people aren't going to make an attempt to repair. The repair is a legitimate apology. They won't do that. They will actually be like, you deserved it. Or like, stop nagging me about it. Or this one. I'm sorry you feel that way. Raise your hand if you've heard that one before, right? I'm sorry you feel that way. Right. That's complete and utter dismissal of your feelings and your experience. Like, well, sorry. That's not my problem. It's yours. Yeah. Look at all these hands coming up. Like, yeah. No. All right. The next way that shows up is control of our money, our time, our friendships, our family, access, home, possessions. I didn't put it on there, but our body. Sex is a biggie, especially for narcissists. Sex is one of their biggest forms of power, of validity or identity for them, of value, of how they control others, and supply. So they will control that. All right. So, and anytime when it comes to control, it's all non-consensual. They're doing it anyway. There was one time I was dating a girl, and she came into my life. She's like, "You're going to spend your money on me," and she told me when and how, and I promptly left. So no, you're not going to control those things because they're not your domain. Okay. So unconsensual control. Because if you're in a relationship and you guys are healthy and you're loving each other and you're respecting boundaries, you're going to have a mutual agreement about how to manage such things. But it's not going to be about control. It's going to be about nurturing each other, nurturing trust, and, like mutual goals, things like that. Okay, so the wear down. How many of you guys have ever felt worn down by the other person? Yeah. It's like they just keep coming at it. It's like the 3-year-old. But why? But why? Or are we there yet? How about now? How about now? How about, oh, geez. Nagging, 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 nagging. You tell them no, and they're back in your face like 3 minutes later. They want it. Do you have a question, Danielle? You have raised your hand. My God. If you do, you can. If you should be able to unmute yourself now. But if not, you're good. And if you're just raising up to say me, that's cool too. So I'm gonna lower it. So all right, the repeating of demands. Now, in relationships, sometimes we are the one doing the nagging because, hey, Marshall, you still haven't done the dishes because you agreed to. I'll be like, yes, I need to go set them on fire. Okay, I'll go do it. That's a little different than this because I had an agreement and I didn't follow through. This is where you're saying no. And they want, can we have sex tonight? No, I'm not really in the mood. Okay. What about now? I just answered it. No. Oh, then when? I don't know. I'm not feeling good. I've got the flu. Jesus, man, when is this? That kind of thing. You start getting worn out and they just pressure on you. And then they throw tantrums. Tantrums are a signal of toxic people because mature people don't throw tantrums. They deal. They have the emotional capacity to regulate. And they're like, okay, I'm not going to get it tonight. That's fine. I'll go have a pizza. So the wear down is all about getting you to give up your power, your boundary, your control, so they get what they want. Healthy people will not do that. All right, so buying time. This is a fun one. They promise not to do it again, but then they do it again. Usually within a day or two, if not minutes or hours. They just need another chance. Come on, man. We see this in rom-coms all the time. Just need another chance. I'm sorry, Sally. I'm sorry I smacked you. I won't do it again. I just need another chance. This is them appealing to our empathy. And this is where our empathy becomes weaponized against us. This is where we have to police it and keep it in check going, oh, your behavior is toxic. You are toxic. I am not going to give you another chance. I'm moving on with my life. It is not like, oh, well, you want another chance. Let's see if his toxic behavior changes. No. If a toxic person genuinely wants to change, they're not going to come to you and ask for another chance. They're going to go work out their shit. And then one day they may come and apologize to you for the way they treated you. Having been that person, that's exactly what I did. You work your shit out and you come and you say, I really see how I hurt you and how my behaviors affected you. I'm sorry. And you don't ask for anything else. You move on with your life. That's how a reformed toxic person will behave. Okay? They're going to claim they learned their lesson. They won't do it again, but they have no behavior backing that up. You see a theme here, right? The behavior has to change. And guess what? It's not one change. It's not two change. It's not even 3. It's months. And why months? Because they have to demonstrate a change here and here. And the only way you know that is with that longevity. Because it takes a lot of work to rewire behavior, and that takes experience and practice. And you're not here to be somebody's guinea pig. You're here to live your brilliance, to go out and have a life you love and enjoy. You're not here to rescue or fix people or be the reason they got better. You're here for joy and brilliance. Let them go learn their lessons somewhere else. Let them work it out somewhere else. it doesn't matter what the length of time is. It matters the consistency of the behavior. As long as I'm a big fan of 6 months. But the thing is you're not going to really see it because you're not actively going to be in their life most of the time unless you're dealing with like a family member. Or if you're in you're married to them and exiting the relationship is very, very problematic. So you're giving them another chance. But the length of time should be like forever. But the idea here is that you start seeing a permanent shift in the behavior pattern. It's like, oh, rather than yelling at me, you're asking me how I feel. Oh, rather than demanding I give you something, you're asking me if I can give you that. And it becomes more and more consistent. That's essential. There will be screw ups, but how they manage that screw up is essential. It comes back to the repair. It's like, well, yeah, I really screwed up here and I am so sorry. Here's what I'm going to do differently next time. And they bring it up. You don't bring it up. People who are getting healthy take 100% ownership of everything that's going on, and they're very, very serious about it. Okay. In fact, you might get tired of them asking, saying, well, I really screwed up here. I'm so sorry. And you're like, okay, you just spilled some salt. It's not a big deal. Yeah, they practice accountability because they're building their integrity. They realize they've got a lot of distance to cover. But in no way am I saying you should stay in toxic relationships to find out if it changes, because your life is worth more than that, my friend. Okay. Typically, buying time degrades into dismissiveness, criticism of your complaints. They might even try to make you get comfy with their zone. They're like, well, it's okay if I'm this way. Addicts do this a lot. It's only one drink. It's okay to be drunk just once or twice a week. It's not a big deal. It's okay. They try to pacify you into their comfort zone by becoming dismissive of their commitment to you, your boundaries, and then you find yourself in the middle of it again. So the buying time is a very serious red flag that we tend to get really caught up in. So be mindful of that. Weaponizing your pain against you. So, you feel safe with this person. You've given them a lot of sensitive information. They turn around and use it against you. Who here has gone through that little nightmare there? You just raise your hand or say bye or whatnot.
More times than I can count.
Right. They just, especially narcissists, they'll do this to high heaven. They love it because that's their ammunition to destroy our self-confidence and our image, our self-image. They love it. So they beware of the weaponization. Massive red flag and positive signal of a toxic person. Here's one a lot of people don't think is a red flag of a toxic person. It's called love bombing. Who here knows what love bombing is? Raise your hand or type yes or say yes. I know some of you know. Yes. Yeah, love bombing feels really good. It's kind of euphoric. It's neat. It's how the codependent gets hooked on the narcissist, because the narcissist is giving the codependent a lot of special attention, a lot of compliments, really grandiose compliments, things that don't make any sense, are really irrational, but man, we've wanted to hear things like that before. Kind of like an intense love. You're the one I've been looking for. I know it's only been 48 hours, but God, I've never felt this way before. I feel it so intensely. We should really like make it exclusive right now. And I've been looking for you all my life. You're so perfect. And you complete me. Yeah, that's love bombing. We have to be extremely mindful of that because it can be seductive and it can be confusing because it hits things that have not been fed in a long time, and we get swept up in it. So we're going to be very, very careful there. Typically, love bombing will also escalate the intimacy, connection, and commitment irrationally fast. I have seen and experienced where the escalation within weeks goes from we just met to we're married. That's just completely absurd. I've seen escalation of financial involvement to tens of thousands of dollars within a month for some of my clients, because the dude was a narcissistic wife and he wasn't going to pay his bills, so she started paying them all for him, type of thing. Intimacy, connection, all of that goes really, really, really fast. Yeah, they wanted to provide for your financial needs right away. You know why they want to do this? This is not a slide in here, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway. They do this so they get control. They want your power reduced so that you're reliant on them, so that they can corral and police you because you're their supply. It's like taking a wild horse out of the wild, putting it in a pen, and then breaking it. Then become submissive, and you can ride that horse all you want. That's what they're doing there. It's a way they protect and then get control of their supply. So be mindful of love bombing. It's not going to work for you. Healthy love, healthy adoration comes in a form of like, I really like you. You're really cool. I'd like to get to know you more. So would you like to go on coffee on Tuesday? I think you're cute. This is cool. Or you're really pretty. Let's try this. They're not going to be like, my God, I've known you for 4 hours. I'm in love with you. No, that's not going to happen. And if you want more information on how healthy dating actually works, check out my Dating 101 stuff. So we go into that quite a bit. All right, so intermittent reinforcement is the next fun one. This is where we get hooked, and this is where we get hooked psychologically and emotionally, and this is where trauma bonding and what's called love addiction start to show up. Intermittent reinforcement happens in a cycle, and I should have put the image up, but it starts off with, hey, I love bomb you. You're so cool. You're the best thing in the world. I've never known anybody like you. And then all the loving things you've been asking for start showing up. So you've been in a dry period, for instance, like he or she's just not doing the thing. And you've been trying your best to please them, to fix them, to make it easy or safe for them. And then suddenly you get in this fight. And then later on, they come in and they start doing everything you asked them to. They start love bombing you. And you're going, wow, I fixed it. It worked. They're hooking you because you started to withdraw, or they perceived you withdrawing. They're trying to reel you back in with the bait they know you want because you've told them what they want. They know what you want. They just don't want to give it to you. This is how they do it. This is often very short-lived. It's done to get what they want. It is not done to get what you want. So if you're with a toxic person and they suddenly become really nice and attentive and loving, they want something from you. And that's, if you're already that deep in, it's time to get out. But intermittent reinforcement creates a psychological attachment to the person that we have to break and move through, which is called trauma bonding. So intermittent reinforcement is a way they try to keep you hooked in the system. Okay. Does it sound familiar to any of you? Is this something you've gone through?
Absolutely.
What was that like for you?
You and I have talked before about Teal Swan, but she actually did probably a 15 or 20-minute thing that shows the rat with the intermittent reinforcement and how basically when it was intermittent, the rat kind of went crazy and became obsessed with it. And and when I was dating this woman, I told her, I said, you're consistently inconsistent. I never know what I'm going to get. Is she going to be soft and warm and ready to connect? Can I be excited and give her a hug when I see her? Or, I would have to sit there and see, where she was at. Did she want everything quiet? Could I turn on the stereo in the car and sing a song? And everything was always about her mood, where she was at. And then, you talked earlier about, come here, go away.
Yeah.
She had, because of her early childhood trauma, she had, I forget what you called it, the attachment dysfunction that you called it, but every time we would part, we dated long distance, but every time we would part, she would totally withdraw. And I talked to her about it. I said, can we try a different, in just a few days before, we ended up breaking up months ago. Yeah, I asked her, and I was very specific, can we make sure and connect tonight? 10 hours later, I was driving back home, and later on she messaged me and she's like, okay, well, hope, you got home safe. I'm not feeling too on it, so I'm going to take a bath and, good night. And I'm just like, wait a minute, we've been over this a million times, and very specific, and asked her if we can, connect with a phone conversation for just a little bit. And it just never mattered. Everything was always about whatever state she was in and what she needed.
Yep. And that got you hooked, I imagine. It makes you feel a little crazy too.
Absolutely.
All right, yeah. Thank you for sharing, Dave. Let's see.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so let's unmute. Okay, I've unmuted you, LGX Venture, because you raised your hand. So sounds like you've experienced this too.
It's Anna.
Oh, hi, Anna.
So my ex did this to me during our marriage. We separated 3 times before the 4th time, which was the final time, and we got divorced. And during the separations, that's when he would finally decide that he needed to do something, and he would love bomb me again like he did when we dated, and just do all of these things that you've listed here. And of course, they would only last until I would let him move back in.
Yep.
And each time he would promise, no, this time it's not going to.
See if that delay.
Next time I am not separating. I am getting a divorce. And the next time I didn't wait for him to blow up or to do anything. Usually he had hit me or had done something.
Mm-hmm.
I always made him have the consequence for his big actions. And I was just done. I was like, I'm not going to wait for another bomb.
Right.
I see him escalating, and I'm going to say I quit now.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually threw him for a huge loop. It really pissed him off. Like, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
But I took my power back.
Yep.
And anyway, that was my example of intermittent reinforcement.
Yeah, it's how they do it, and it really gets us, and it can drive us crazy. So, all right, so yeah, be mindful of that, because it's a very covert way of getting you back in the game. Because remember, the only thing they need is supply, and that supply is going to come through you at your cost. Okay. And then the last one I want to bring up is all on their terms. So the time, the activities, the plans are done according to what's convenient for them, like what Dave was describing in his experience. They don't really consider how their behaviors impact you, your life, your well-being, your desires, your needs, your plans. They're not proactive either in discussing or informing you of changes. I have one client who her boyfriend would repeatedly change things. So they had a standing arrangement where they spent their Sundays together. Well, the last 2 months, he was not doing this anymore, kind of thing. And he doesn't tell her. And then so when she confronts him on it, he's like, what's the problem? I mean, I had a thing with my children. Well, you could have told me. But no, they didn't. So this is a real serious thing that shows up chronically with this. We have to be very, very mindful of how they're not proactive about including us in changes that do affect us. Okay? Caring, loving people inform us. You're informed, you inform them, they inform you. It's mutual, there's understanding. It's very simple. It's actually kind of boring, which is good. Boring is a positive sign in that respect. So think about that. And they tend to get upset if you inconvenience them. If you say no, or you change plans, they're just like, what? I can't do that. So they have very little accommodation to you as a person, you as with your feelings, you with your desires, you with your own happiness. They're not going to make space for that. They don't want that because it takes away from them. So, okay.
And Marshall, this is Dave again. I just wanted to validate something you said earlier about the dictionary and having a different dictionary. I was married for 18 years, and we'd be in an argument, and at the most opportune time, she would love to point out how I'm reacting. So I would just make an excellent point, and she'd say, "Why are you so upset?"
Yep.
And she was upset too. And I said to her, what do you mean? You're upset too? Oh no, I'm not upset. I'm just annoyed. You know?
Yeah.
And she would play literally. It wasn't until we separated after almost 18 years, and I had told her our whole marriage, you criticize me all the time. And she would say, no, I don't criticize you. I correct you. And finally, I don't know what reason I had to do this, but I pulled my phone up and I said, and we were separated, but I was over at the house getting something and we got in an argument. And I pulled it up and it said criticize, to point out real or perceived imperfections or flaws. And I read that to her. And she says, well, I guess according to that definition, I guess I do criticize you. And I said, what definition did you think we were using? And so literally it's 17 years of she had a completely different playbook. So it's always hypocritical. You can never win. It doesn't matter because they're always moving the goalposts.
Yep.
So just wanted to add that.
No, thank you, because it's an excellent form of all on their terms. They change the definition of the term. So then you can't win. There's no accountability because, again, it's you. You're just too stupid to know what I really meant. I remember getting that one. It's like, what? So, okay, so tactics to watch out in this. Now my little asterisks there. Not all possible tactics. These are just the common ones. Darvo, gaslighting, blame shifting, 4 horsemen, control wear down, buying time, weaponizing your past, love bombing, intermittent reinforcement, and then a domestic violence grid. This little puppy. Probably can't see it well. It'll be in the slides for you, but this outlines a lot of different elements of domestic violence. Toxic people often become violent, and since in the relationship is domestic, knowing these kinds of signals can tell you where you are and what's going on, and then we can get you out of that situation in a way that will protect you. I've had to help a number of clients exit these kinds of systems, and it's got to be calculated and deliberate depending on what the toxicity is, because most of the time statistically you're most at risk at the exit phase. Especially after you've left. So if you're in that kind of situation, please reach out to either me or thehotline.org or 411 for your area. They will have resources and information to help you move out of that situation. All right, so let's contrast with healthy people. Toxic behaviors, then over here, healthy behaviors. On the right side, toxic on the left. Healthy behaviors, they respect your boundaries. You know why? Anybody know why somebody would respect your boundaries? Because
they actually know what love and respect is. I mean, I'm not sure other than that.
No, that's valid. Any other? They care about how you feel. Healthy people care about how you feel. They don't want to hurt you. They want you to be happy. Well, yeah, I mean, they expect you to respect theirs as well, but that can also be on the dark. That can be a toxic. My parents were always like, we don't respect your boundaries because you don't respect ours. I'm like, I respect your boundaries all the time. This idea that can be pretty iffy there, Gail. genuinely, if we come from the premise of I care about how you feel, we're not going to violate your boundary because we understand that your boundary helps you feel good, safe. We want you to feel safe being you. We want you to feel safe being with us, that kind of thing. So fundamentally, healthy behaviors are driven from a desire to care about how the other person feels, not to fix, not to control, not to caretake, because that would be the codependent component, but to just say, hey, yeah, I care. I see what's going on. They're accountable. They have integrity. They're reliable. They ask directly and kindly. They're not passive aggressive. They're not aggressive. They accept the no's. They honor your past. Okay. This is important because we talked about weaponizing the past. Well, they're going to go like, a person who is cognizant of another human being in a loving way is going to say, well, I'll put it in my own context. I was dating a gal who understood my history really well. I told her about most of the things that happened. And there was this time where I locked down. I didn't realize I had shut down. She's like, oh, you're shutting down. What happened? And I was like, well, you said this. And she's like, oh, okay, I see where you're coming from. I totally, okay. She owned it and she repaired it. Other times she was very mindful about it. She's going, I know this is a sensitive place for you. I'm just here for you. They care about it. They made note of it. They internalized it as invaluable to them too. Okay. Yeah, they know what their boundaries are and they respect you for it. Yeah, but it can be a function of that, Bob. But I tell you, I've been abused with that line a number of times in my life, where it's like, and maybe I'm interpreting it that way, because if I reverse it in my head, yeah, like I respect my values, I value my boundaries, I will gladly value yours. So yeah, you're right in that context. We just got to be careful how that gets in there. And you guys just witnessed a little trigger there. Cool. So for me, but yeah, they validate, honor, and your experience, your feelings, what you want, what matters to you, while doing the same thing for them. They love that because now it's mutual, kind of like what you guys, Bob and Gav, you've been saying there. Is like, well, I really love me and I love you too. So it's an inward outward expression there. And then with healthy people, intimacy is gradual. They get it. They're like, I know this is scary. I know we have to develop trust because guess what? I'm evaluating how you fit me too. So we're being gentle with it as we grow into our intimacy and our awareness of self. So that's the contrast we want to be focused on. We got to be aware of the toxic behavior so we know who to say no to, who to avoid in our lives. And then the green. I mean, I didn't do this for Christmas colors. Toxic means stop, get the hell out, run. Like my little picture of Ripley. You can't help them. They're being cocooned. Get out of there. Green means go. Green flags mean this is a safe time to advance forward in this relationship or friendship. And this applies to all relationships. Business, friend, platonic, sexual, romantic, even parental, children, especially children or become adults. We don't have to tolerate that kind of behavior. All right. So patterns of behavior tell the truth. I'll reinforce this again. Words are shit. I don't care what they say. I care what they do and what they do consistently. You follow this rule, you will be in healthier relationships. You will be happier. And when you start following it, you'll also be doing it to yourself. You're like, how's my behavior lining up with what I say? Because, we might have to look at our own integrity sometimes too, because, we're all human. All right, so let's see. Truth is the first thing. Yep. Yeah. Yep. I agree. Fear of intimacy is fear of the truth. Yep. I totally agree. So combating toxic behaviors. I'm going to get to that jelly center of our donut tonight. How to combat toxic behaviors. Remember, toxic means poisonous. Virulent. It's deadly. So I should have put the picture in there, but like in Aliens, they shoot the alien, it spews acid and it just burns everything up. You're not going to go make friends with the thing. It's going to kill you. That's what it does, okay? So there's certain behaviors that combat toxic people. The first one is to limit our exposure to the toxicity. That means we may have to leave the relationship. We may have to go no contact. We may have to greatly gauge and minimize the interaction we have with the person through a process called gray rocking. And when you get the review email from me, you'll actually have links to these processes. Okay, so you know what they are, you know how to apply them. This is your most powerful component in dealing with toxic people, is to limit or eliminate exposure. It's not like you walk around with radiation, some radiation in your pocket because it's fun. That's just going to kill you. You know it's going to kill you because it's toxic to you. It's the same thing with people with toxic behaviors. We limit exposure. If necessary, we confront and maintain our story. Sometimes we have to do that. Been in that position several times for several reasons, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to be consistent about my story, which is going to be focused on the behavior, and I'm going to maintain that confrontation as is necessary, if it's physically safe. Most of us are women. You guys are going to be facing a very serious, disparity with a violent man, so we have to be careful there. Men, I've been beat up by women. Most of my abusers were women, but most of that abuse came through sexual abuse. But if we don't feel physically safe, we have to gauge that situation a little differently, especially if we're dealing with domestic violence. So there's some caveats here. But we got to maintain our story. We got to maintain our sanity, okay? So we got to journal the experience. Journal what you felt. Journal what you said, what you did. Journal what they said and what they did in like a factual approach, because it helps your brain keep it straight. It helps you understand what's going on, what happened, especially if you need to go back and recall it. Because when you're in a high state of stress, your memory doesn't write. Especially long-term memory is highly fractured or fragmented. Writing it down helps you keep your sanity, okay? There's a tool for those of you who are members of the Thrive All Access Pass or the HEAL process. There's a tool in there called SaneMaker that can do that with you. And then do discuss it with safe people. Don't carry this alone. You will go crazy with that. You need to be validated, you need to be heard, and you need to be supported in that, in exiting that kind of toxicity. Okay. The next thing to do with toxic behaviors is to understand that it is not about you and it is not you. You didn't cause this. This comes from a very different place inside of them. This is their reactivity to the circumstance and the trigger. And an effective process is to manage this is called observe, don't absorb. This means we become an observer, like, oh, they're behaving over there. Look at what they are doing. Look at how they are behaving. Rather than absorbing, like, well, how am I making them do this? What did I do to cause this? What did I do to make them behave this way? That's absorbing them. Observing is like, wow, look, he's just exploding. Look at that. That's different. That kind of thing. You will receive a link to an ODA process I teach in the review email. So you can go through that a little more. All right. Now you can establish clear, firm boundaries and consequences. I tend to equate toxic people a lot to how we treat 3-year-olds. Be clear, dead clear. Like, do not open the door unless you knock. And then the consequence is, if you open the door without knocking, I'm going to remove you from the house. Let's say that's the consequence. I don't know. Let's just go with it. If I make that consequence, I must follow through like clockwork. I have to be like gravity. Anybody here ever have gravity not work for you? Anybody? Has it been pretty consistent for you? I imagine so, right? We got to be like that. We have to be so consistent. And if we're non-reactive with that, we win. Because their reactivity is dependent on your reactivity and you not following through on a consequence. So if you establish a consequence, make sure you execute it. And then manage reactivity. Reactivity just gives them everything they want. Because once you react, they win. Because they can turn it around on you. Oh, look at you. Why are you so upset? That kind of thing. Yep, we will play the drama triangle of victim, perpetrator, enabler. Yep, absolutely. So we want to be very mindful of these things. This is how we combat them. Now, I say combat for a very specific reason. It's not live with them. It's not build a city or a life with toxic people. It's dealing with them in the moment until we can get out of it. Because again, we'll go back up to the definition. That I put somewhere else. I guess I won't bring it up. Toxic is virulent. It's going to harm us. Period. So these are about navigating the situation until we get out of it. To get out of it, we get therapy, get help from proven mentors, therapists, or healers that have results that show that they can help you through that. Because not all of them are qualified in this. Not all of them are prepared for it. I see it a lot from all of three types of these things. I'm very specialized in this, but I wouldn't, don't come to me if you want business advice. That kind of thing, although you could, because I'm pretty good at business, but I wouldn't be like, it's not my specialty. Go to people who have proven results for helping you in your situation so that you get the results you deserve. You're not spinning your tires. You're not wasting your time. Okay. Any thoughts, any questions on that before we run through love addiction and then we wrap this up? If you do, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. No, we're good. Okay. Let's see. Karina says, yeah, it did, didn't it, Karina? It catapulted after you minimize that contact. And there's a good reason for that. Our brains can't adapt, heal, or change when it's in a state of hypervigilance or a triggered state of fear because of the way the brain works with blood flow and neurological connections. When the brain is in fear, it's switched, I call it switched backwards. So it's relying on the governance of the amygdala, the hippocampus, hypothalamus, things like that to make decisions. And so it will make decisions based on survival. But when we get out of survival and we have some respite away from the stimulus of the threat, which would be the narcissist or the abuser, our brain can re-engage the prefrontal cortex. We can start to think and reason again. And then we can make different choices and more creative choices that produce outcomes for that. That's another reason why we need to exit toxic systems, because it will neurologically harm us. And we will not be able to heal when we're in them. My success rate is 98% of those who do the work success. The 2% that don't, part of that 2% are people who are stuck in these situations. So my job at that point isn't to help them heal, it's help them exit, get them into a period of rest, and then we can start to heal. So it's a different approach for them. All right. So there's a very important component that runs behind the scenes for a lot of people when dealing with chronic toxic relationships in their lives, and it's called love addiction. Now, this is a very basic overview of it to bring awareness to you of it. It's not in depth. I will be doing classes on this in the future, but it's something to just create an awareness for you. Love addiction is a psychological trauma bond with another person where our brain has confused their abuse for love. We get a high when they treat us nicely, and then we ignore when they treat us badly. We excuse it, we dismiss it, and we work hard to get that high back through intermittent reinforcement. This hooks us into being absorbed into them. So symptoms of love addiction, you return to the abuser over and over and over, regardless of what they do. And you know this is a problem. You know this person treats you badly, but sometimes you can't even explain it. You're just going back because there's an enormous pull for you. And it's not like you're thinking about it. It's just like, oh, this enormous feeling of I need them because I don't want to deal with the collapse of my life. I don't want to deal with the loneliness, the emptiness that comes when I don't have them around. That's a signal of love addiction. Feelings of affection despite their abuse. That's where you end up. This is where you see people defending the abuser. It's like, no, he's not really that way. He loves me because I've got a black eye because he punched him. That kind of thing. Emotional dissociation. We just disconnect from ourselves. We're just not really in the present anymore. We regard the abuser as the victim. We defend them. They're just misunderstood. You don't really understand their history. So there's a defense system there. Yeah. Now, Karina, I mean, this is your story. You kicked ass. You got out of that love addiction, and it was work, but you did it. And people who break out of this, anybody who gets out of this badass, because good Lord, look at what we had to deal with. But yeah, I'm proud of you. You kicked some ass there. Quite a bit of it, actually. You also feel an intense psychological dependence on their validation and their approval. This is important. Love addiction and codependency go hand in hand. Love addiction will drive some codependency, but generally they're kind of like comorbid. Kind of like a runny nose would be the codependency, and the flu is the love addiction kind of thing. When you resolve the love addiction, the codependency disintegrates in a lot of ways. Then we just have to deal with a lot of skill level stuff. There's a thing I call the love wound that's a major driver of codependency, and it is synonymous with the love addiction. So, and in the systems I teach, like HEAL and or the HEAL mentorship, we go into that, and I have a certain course that'll be coming out later this month in January that deals specifically with the love addiction from multiple angles, so we can resolve it quickly and permanently. So yeah, they do have a very strong relationship there, Alicia. And then we crave their attention, affection, and validation. I mean, we crave it. They're the person we want. We want them. Whereas if we put this in more of a lighter aspect of codependency, I just want attention, or I just want validation from everybody. But love addiction is like, that person completes me. That one person. I can't live without that person. That would be love addiction. Love addiction is a result of what's called unmatured attachment. Children are born in a physical, psychological, and emotional attachment to the parent. Then as they begin to find out who they are, they do go through a maturation process called differentiation or individuation. And if that process gets aborted because of trauma, neglect, abandonment, then the person is locked into that state, into that age state, until they can mature out of it. Love addiction shows up in that state. So when we mature the attachment, the love addiction dissolves. So it's really a signal of, I need to mature in this attachment and become more of who I am. And so that's how I approach love addiction. Idealization is a function of codependency, and it's where we turn somebody into an ideal, and it can be a function of love addiction, Bob, where we make them into the perfect person in our minds. We paint a picture about them. We put them on a pedestal. Love addiction will frequently do that. Codependency does that, and to a certain extent as well. That's why they're highly related. Emotional intelligence does go up as we mature emotionally. Yeah, because we develop a stronger sense of empathy, but also self-awareness. We realize, especially if we're coming from an empath point of view, we realize that I have my feelings, you have your feelings, and they are distinct. So, okay. So those are the signals of love addiction. There's things to keep an eye out. The love addiction is the thing that keeps you going back to a toxic person. So if you're struggling with this, do reach out. We will help you. Now, what to do if you have this? Contact me or an experienced therapist to begin healing and rebuilding yourself. Don't attempt to self-help yourself out of this. Speaking from experience. It cost me 10 years of my life, hundreds of thousands of hours and dollars, and lots of pain. Once I got the help I needed, it was like, oh, I know me now. I know where I am and where I belong. And now I do not have that issue anymore. I'm more like, I'm willing to commit. I'm willing to find out what happens because I know how I am. I know how this works. And very much more relaxed in bonding with people. But it is amazing. You've got to have guidance, accountability, and trauma healing done to get out of. So reading a book will not do this. General talk therapy will not heal this. You got to get in there deep and begin to mature the emotional attachment and resolve any trauma, shame, fear, guilt, or fear, fatigue that might be in the way. All right. So extracting yourself from toxic people. Pretty simple stuff. And I didn't put the right slide in there, as you can see. So extracting ourselves from toxic people is very, very simple. It just comes back to the function of limiting exposure, confronting and going and maintaining our story, understanding that it's not you. Don't, observe, don't absorb. Establish clear and firm boundaries, execute your consequences, and then manage your reactivity, and then get therapy or help if you've been in this for a chronic period of time. So okay, so here's a question that I often get with this. Do they know what they do? Do they know that they're doing this? Depends. Some do. Some don't. It doesn't matter. Most of the time, what they're doing is really normal to them. They don't really know any better. But again, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the behavior is toxic. So it's not our job to raise them. We're not their parents. We're not accountable for their immaturity, for their pain, for their injury, for where they're at. We are accountable for ourselves. My son-in-law does not get it. What does he not get? Right here, give you a moment here, Gail. All right. So, but yeah, they don't understand, and it doesn't matter. If they do understand, it doesn't matter. All right. That he's toxic in his. Oh, well, of course he's not. He's a victim in his mind, likely. It's normal to him. This is how people behave. He may justify his behaviors because he's been hurt in the past, and so he doesn't have to change. Everybody else does. But there's no way to wake him up. That's not your job anyway. Your job is to move on with your life. Be the brilliant, powerful, and beautiful person you are. Yeah, they will always play the victim card. Always. Because the victim says, not me. The world is doing this to me. When in reality, their behavior is causing this to happen to them. But they won't see it that way. And they don't see it that way because now they got to deal with the shame. They've got to deal with this crushing sense of terror that they are horrible. Because somewhere in their world, they have equated their value with being terrible naturally, especially if they made mistakes of some sort. And now they've got to protect against being flawed in order to be, to exist and to justify their existence, to be lovable. So we got to be really mindful of that. But yeah, he's not going to change. All right. So, yeah, I would like my daughter. Yeah. She can watch it. It'll be up in a replay tomorrow, and you'll get an email with that, along with the other resources. So, all right, so now we have an open period for 10, 15 minutes. If you have questions or there's something you would like to discuss specifically about your situation, and then we'll conclude. You will have to unmute yourself or ask it in the chat. Either way, whatever works for you. If not, I'm good too. It's like, who wants to talk first or fun things like that? Okay. No questions? We're good? Okay.
Good, man.
Ooh, we're good? Okay, great. So here's some resources for you, just right out of the bat. You can go to resources.freetheself.com. That's going to forward you to my site. This is where I have a lot of things that are free and available to you right now. There is a lot to absorb. Yep. I tend to pack these things because I want to get you value and I want it to be effective and I don't want to waste your time. So yeah. Then if you're in a domestic violence situation, you need to check out thehotline.org. They have got a lot of valuable resources there. That have helped a lot of people get out of situations. Damn. I've used it a lot with clients that have helped them get out of that stuff. And then your 411 number. Yeah, that really hit me hard. We'll have information to help you get out of domestic violence situations. But I'm here to help you and support you through those experiences and help you thrive beyond it because you can, because you deserve to. I'm going to unmute you here, Anna, and lower your hand. Ooh, oh, it won't let me unmute you. You'll have to unmute yourself, Anna. Okay, so childhood attachment trauma, how do we deal with it? That's a big one. That's a very big one. I can do a workshop on it. There's no way for me to adequately answer that question now. You are in the HEAL course in the mentorship. When we get into weeks 5, 6, and 7, we actually start dealing with that. So you get some answers there too. Yeah, what is the 411? 411 is a number you call. It's information. Will there be a part 2? There's actually going to be. We're going to have a workshop. I was going to do it this month, but it's December and I've gone crazy with the busyness of things. So I'm going to put it into January. January 10th, we're going to do, specifically, we're going to talk about the narcissistic person in your life. So we're going to get deeper on narcissistic aspects of things. And then we'll see what you guys want to do after that one if you want to learn more about borderliners. There will also be workshops dealing with codependency and specific aspects of it. Like there'll be workshops on pleasers and fixers and things like that. So there's a lot coming over the next several months for you. They may have changed it. Last time I checked, it still was that. There could also be 211. Obviously, if you're in an emergency, you can dial 911. Unless you're in Britain, then it's 999. Or if you watch the IT Crowd, then it's a really long number that I can never remember. But it's a pretty funny episode. Do most never heal? Toxic people? People who do not take responsibility for their behaviors cannot heal because they cannot change the toxic behavior because they think it's somebody else's fault. So no, they don't. I am a recovered toxic person. And so, yeah, it can happen, but it didn't happen because somebody loved me. It didn't happen because somebody fixed me. It didn't happen because somebody came in my life and rescued me from myself. It happened when someone I loved and cared about and trusted a lot told me to my face to grow the fuck up. You're playing the victim. Stop being a victim. I'm done with you. Goodbye. Those weren't her exact words. Some of them were, but she was basically to the point of like, I can't live with this. You're up to your eyeballs in being a victim. I can't be in a relationship with that. I have to leave. Thanks. Goodbye. That really woke me up. That changed my life. But I took it in. I made the change. And her firmness with her boundaries really got me to look at that. And it got me to look at, it was a cascade of things though. It wasn't just one event. There was a domino of shit going on in my life at that time that really forced me to look at what was going on. So yeah, I had to grow up. That percentage, narcissistic people recover less than 1%. Borderliners is 20. And those are not really solid stats for anything that's really useful. So generally, yeah. So okay, let's see. Once you start growing mentally and spiritually, start to see positive results, growth in your life. Yeah. And growth. We can do a workshop on what healing really is, because it's a challenge, but it's a good thing. So, okay. So I want a little feedback before we conclude tonight, guys. How was the workshop for you? What did you get out of this for you? Excellent. Thank you, Danielle. Clarity. What did you get clarity on? You're welcome, Anna. Thank you. Yep, it is not your fault. Their behavior has nothing to do with you. You are free. You are innocent. Innocent. Not your fault. You didn't cause it. Nope. You don't have the magical power of causing people to do things. People do things because of their own psychology. Whatever is in them makes them do the thing. Nope, can't fix it. You don't need to fix it. You were never able to fix it. It's absurd to anybody that claims that you should be able to fix that is absurd, because you can't fix an enclosed system. You can't get in there and fix it because they're the ones controlling it. Yeah, you're not crazy, Alicia. Not crazy at all. You went through crazy making, but you ain't crazy. What you went through is real, valid. Essentially, you can actually start to trust your experience going, yeah, that really made me feel crazy. You can trust that they tried to make you feel crazy. You can trust that they're crazy. Okay, Gail. So you say, I saw myself. So, and I know you've done a lot of impressive and powerful work. So you've grown out of that, like myself. We've grown out of that toxic place and become more powerful, loving people. You are the normal person. I love that you used that, Jenny. We are normal. Those people they're coming from an abnormal point of view and a normal experience. Identifying normal is key. Yep. That's why we come back up here. Healthy behaviors. You could also say normal behaviors. And guys, I have this thing in the dating class and in Heal that I teach. It's called bare minimum. These healthy behaviors are bare minimums. Bare minimum. If people are not doing the bare minimums, don't be in their world. Go and be in other people's worlds where they love at least being at the minimum these things. Don't go over. Don't let this other bullshit happen. You don't deserve it. You have other things to do with your life than recover. That's okay, Bob. There'll be a replay, so you can go through that. Let's see. But I thought I had a love addiction to a past relation, but according to your definition, it seems more like codependency, probably. Yeah, likely. Yeah, love addiction is an extremely intense and controlling thing, but the codependent component is a little more broad. Still intense, but not necessarily like love addiction. Okay. Ooh. Yep. Yeah, you do most of the work. You're the one who's emotionally invested. Do they apologize? Do their actions change? Are they private? Do they, don't? Yeah, you're getting into the gritty there. Yeah, do they keep things private? Can they communicate without judgment? Do they talk down to you? Yep, you feel like you're walking on eggshells. Life and love is supposed to be fun. Is there any humor in it? Yep. You need to change. It's never them that needs to change, right? And if they make a mistake, they can't laugh about it. They don't give feedback, and your heart feels empty. Yeah, those are really good positive signals of a toxic relationship. And red flags all around. I like that list. And I know Charles' work, too. I've studied some of his stuff. He's cool. Yeah, she may not be toxic. And she may be another codependent. There's definitely codependent components that are toxic, such as blame shifting, control are two elements. Fixing is a very toxic thing to do. But it isn't the same. It's toxic, but there's a different dimension to it, in my mind at least. But our job here, because most of us probably come from a framework of codependency, is becoming aware of toxic people. If we identify toxic behaviors in ourselves, we can resolve them. But the real kicker here is being willing to say no and walk away from toxic people, not stick around because they're toxic. Okay, so if you have any questions or you want help, you want to get more information on things, you can go to thrivebeyondcodependency.com, or you can contact me at experts@freetheself.com. I appreciate you guys being here. Let's see. Gail says, I am back to believing the daughter D is simply mourning. She probably is. Knowing, we've discussed some of that, it would make sense. That would make sense to me. But I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your time, your investment here with me. And I want you to remember one thing to take with you tonight. If anything you get from this is that you are worth knowing, you are worth loving, and you are worth keeping. And you're very welcome. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, you're very welcome. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. You guys have a Merry Christmas. Have a happy holiday. Expect a couple of emails from me. And then otherwise, I look forward to seeing you guys in future workshops. Obviously, this one that's coming up in January. You'll get information on that at the last week of December. You're very, very welcome, Karina. And you're welcome, Jenny. So appreciate you guys. And we'll talk soon. Okay? Good night, guys. Love you too, Gail. Have fun. Good night, guys.